Greetings, happy warriors, and welcome to the Rabbi Daniel Lapin Show, where we don't have this opportunity so often, and I really ought to make sure it happens far more often, but that is, it's a joint conversation. Susan Lapin and me, we are together going to talk about the topic of today's podcast. But first of all, I want to welcome you all and remind you that the more that things change, the more we need to depend on those things that never change. And happy warriors, as your rabbi, I've got a little bit of housekeeping first to deal with immediately, and then we'll move right on. First of all, as always, I ask you please to subscribe. This is like standard, isn't it? I don't think I've heard and I listen to podcasts. I don't think I've heard a podcast lately where somebody, doesn't say, and please don't forget to subscribe. So I'm not going to take the time to explain why, because I don't think there's an individual left on the planet who doesn't understand how algorithms work on the various platforms. So subscribing is a help. That's all there is to it. And if you are able to do that, we appreciate it. So thanks very much for that.
It's help to the listener, because otherwise it's very easy for a few weeks to go by and you all of a sudden realize, I haven't heard a podcast I really enjoy. When I subscribe, it helps me also.
Yeah, I found that I have subscribed to a number of podcasts for exactly that reason.
I do, because otherwise there are so many things. And
yeah,
obviously sometimes a headline or the topic grabs me, and sometimes it grabs me less. But if I wasn't subscribed, I probably would drop some things that I really enjoy.
I think that at some point in the future, I think people might be interested to know what you're subscribed to and what I'm subscribed to.
Okay.
People might find that interesting. So we'll do that. Okay, second thing I wanted to mention is this. And this one is really for your benefit. And that is, we have prepared a free ebook for happy warriors. It's called Boost Your Income: 3 Spiritual Strategies for Financial Success. And here's the great thing. You may download it absolutely for free. It's got a lot of the really crucial material that people need to wrap themselves around to effect significant change in financial outcome. And it's called Boost Your Income. It's available you'll see it at RabbiDanielLapin.com. It's at our website, RabbiDanielLapin.com. Always point out 2 L's, because sometimes it's hard. Daniel ends with an L.
It's easy to misspell it.
And Lapin starts with an L. But there it is, RabbiDanielLapin.com. Look for the free ebook, Boost Your Income. It's right there on the homepage. You should have no trouble finding it. We really would like you to have this as a gift and implement it, please, because the more money that happy warriors succeed in generating, the more you will be listened to and the more influential you will be. That's a reality, right? Because people don't pay much attention to broke people. So Boost Your Income is going to, I hope, make you a more influential happy warrior. And that is the goal right there. Now, Susan and I started talking recently about an article that appeared in the Wall Street Journal. And one of the wonderful things about living with Mrs. Lapin is that she comes up with articles and I come up with articles, but when we talk about them, we get ever so much more out of them. And it's probably not bad for our marriage either.
I did actually on my Substack a few weeks ago. That was the topic of my Substack. I wrote about family reading, not just be reading with children, but also within a marriage, that's a very healthy thing for a marriage. And for an example here is this article. I happened to read this one first, and I sent it to you. And pretty much what happened was that instead of saying, let's discuss it over supper tonight, we said, well, why don't we just discuss it with many other people in a podcast?
All right. So since it was your article, you go for it.
So the article is by Claire Ansberry, and it's entitled Why Success is Quieter for younger Americans, and appeared June 28th in the Wall Street Journal. And it actually, at first glance, it sounds like it contradicts you're telling people to please download Boost Your Income for free, because it's how important it is to boost your income, because it is actually the antithesis of that. What it is saying, the article is stating, is that, here's the first chapter, younger adults are redefining success and shifting their focus from wealth to health. And then we can get into the specifics of the article.
And it's not only health, is it?
Well, it's heavily health, mental and physical.
Okay, mental.
So that's really the gist of the article, is that people are saying, I'm thinking that being wealthy isn't really important or as important. And of course, my immediate reaction is, well, they should have gotten this book, The Holistic You, because if they had this book, our book with its accompanying workbook, we've been saying this, that even while, and I think everyone should download Boost Your Income, but we have never said that that is the goal of life, is to boost your income. It fits into a holistic you. It fits into 5 areas. One of the frustrating things here was it says that wealth came in 5th among young people, young adults, when they ranked what's important. It doesn't tell you what the 5 things are.
I know. I tried to derive them myself.
Physical and mental health was the top measures of success, with wealth is 5th. So we don't know what
wealth
3
is number
and 4,
5. So
we don't know what 3 and 4 is.
My first reaction to that, and tell me if you think I'm right or not, my first reaction to that was, do you remember there was a movie about I think it was Howard Hughes, and I think he was played by Leonardo DiCaprio. I may be wrong, but in the movie he was visiting a wealthy family, and I think this was before he'd really broken through. And Katharine Hepburn said to him something like, I wish I had the exact words, it was nice script writing. She said something like, in our family, in this home, we don't like talking too much about money. To which he responded,
that's because you haven't.
Yes,
something
exactly.
of that sort. I haven't seen. I don't think I know the movie, but
he said, that's a luxury that people who have plenty of it can afford. Is this an article about very upwardly mobile, financially successful Gen Z people?
Yes, and I think that is the point. At a certain point, they speak to someone who's a father of 3, and he says he wants to have security that he can take care of his family, but he also he wants to know his children. He wants the success. I think he defines success. He heard it from someone else who said success is when your adult children want to spend time with you, which is a good definition of one aspect of success.
Yes.
And he's saying, I don't want to work so hard. And I think what you've got here is we're talking about wealth. And of course, what is your definition of wealth is part of it. That if your definition of wealth is Hollywood stars, to have multi-billions and to make $1 million every day, that's not a healthy definition of wealth.
Susan, I think one of the things we did really well in The Holistic You is that we showed how focusing on all the 5 F's together in an integrated kind of way helps you arrive at a healthy and viable definition of wealth.
Yes, and I think one of the things that this article makes clear is that, or I think it's a reaction. And whenever there's reactions tend to go a little too far. That's when the pendulum swings. It doesn't swing to the middle. It swings to the other end. So I think you have a generation of men and women who were told so much that you have to focus your 20s and your early 30s. Don't even think about anything other than you. That's your time. You've got to become financially successful. And that was part of the reason we wrote the book, was a reaction to that, to say, no, those are also the years you should be building your family and building your friendships and building your relationship with the spiritual world, with faith. And also, I left one out, whatever it would be, fitness. And so that one I think did go. I think young people tend to, But that went along with, so go to the gym and work. And those were the only 2 things in your life.
And in fact, one of the very first facilities that companies like Microsoft and then much later Google, the very first things they did was build gyms on premises.
That one I think, but the idea was later. You'll worry about family later. And friendships, well, partying was something, but that was almost an unhealthy partying, whether it was drinking or drugs or sex. That's not a real friendship. Partying and friendships are not the same thing. And so I think what's happening I think they're talking about, I don't know what this new generation, what is the generation called? I don't even know. But that there was the reaction is, well, I'm not going to focus on the wealth because I want those other things, instead of recognizing it as part of a holistic you, as part of a picture together. So I think that's my reaction reading this article, is they're going to, 20 years from now, there's going to be the article about the next generation saying, I want to contribute to the world in a way that gives me money and that I find satisfying, because they're going to have gone to their parents will have gone to the other extreme, and that's what happens. The next generation.
So I once had a
goes
client
back and forth.
who originally came and wanted to meet with me over this very question of how does he know what should his financial goals be. He was a capable person, and I have no doubt that had he thrown himself entirely into business to the detriment of health, family, spiritual, everything, I think he might have probably been able to relate net worth in the many hundreds of millions, perhaps even a billion. He could have done that. But when we laid out the 5F analysis and we spent a couple of days going through that and evaluating it, I remember saying to him, so should we now go back to trying to establish what your financial goal is? And he smiled. He says, no, it's clear now. I know exactly what it is. It's not in the hundreds of millions. My goal is in the tens of millions, because that I can do whilst also focusing on family, on fitness, on faith, and on friendships.
So that's what my reaction here was. And also, I think, and this is becoming more acceptable. It's more acceptable to say this today than it was 5 years ago. There's no distinction made in this article between men and women.
Yes.
So when
Good
it
point.
says, one of the points made in the article is that this is a generation that's grown up with social media. And so they now have access to they can read as many blogs, and they can watch vlogs, and they can have access to a whole bunch of older people saying, here are my regrets. And what are these people regretting? These people are regretting that they are, when they reach middle age, they're saying they're regretting that they didn't prioritize their own mental health, physical and mental health, it seems, is what their mental health, I gather, would include relationships, because obviously that's an important thing. And so
the article says COVID-19 reminded millennials and Gen Z adults of the fleeting nature of good health and spurred a mass work-from-home movement. This opened their eyes to other less stressful options and measures of success, says Zach Dichtwald, who's 35 years old, who researches global generational shifts and cross-geography collaboration and is co-author of the study. Health is a success in and of itself, says Dichtwald, who says there are still plenty of people in his age who want to be at the top of law firms and investment banks and see that as success.
So one of the things that I think this younger generation is dealing with, and it's a reality, and it mentions it, they're watching their parents, and part of it is it's just that absolute reaction. Oh my goodness, I'm watching my mother or my father, whether it's diabetes or Alzheimer, they didn't take good enough care of their self. And that's partially what the faith part of we talk about it in Holistic You. Not that one should not take care of oneself. Recognizing that not everything is in our control is an important part of faith. It's understanding, whether you want to call it God, you want to call it nature, whatever you want to call it, the fact is we cannot. Do you remember that? Was his name Jim Fix, who was the runner, who was very big on job?
Yes, I think you're right.
And he died at a relatively young age.
Yes.
So his whole thing, you can do everything absolutely right. You can eat the right foods, and you can filter your water, and you can exercise and do everything that you believe will help. And the bottom line is you cannot control for illness, let alone for the drunk driver or the... I have actually a neighbor. I'm trying to remember when. I think it was in the 60s, maybe the 50s. There was a plane crash over New York, and a piece of the plane fell down and hit a mailman on his route. He was a neighbor. He lived across the street from me. Wow. I mean, you cannot guarantee that you are going to be healthy and that you're going to have a guaranteed long life. So I think that's one of the things I kind of get a feel here, that there's this feeling of I have to control, which is still a very strong feeling, I believe, among a young generation.
That's the faith side of
yes.
the 5 F's. And by the way, I don't know if you remember, I mean, it's not long ago we wrote it, it's a new book, but the chapter headings: Meet the 5 F's, number 1. Number 2, Connect for Success, friendship. Number 3 is Seeing the Invisible.
That's faith.
That's faith. Chapter 4, Fitness, bodybuilding. Number 5, Money and morality. Number 6 was an interesting chapter to write and a very interesting chapter to read: Sex, pleasure, and pain. Number 7 is Some tough decisions. And number 8, Putting the 5 F's to work. And so, yes, the designing of your life, leaving out the F of faith, leaving out the spiritual, leaving out the intangible, I think it's impossible to do successfully.
And part of that intangible, and I get here, they quote a woman called Rachel Beck, who COVID ended up ending her job. It sounds like it might have ended her marriage as well. And she's saying that her definition of success changed. It was very personal. Well, she's dealing blackjack at a resort, and she's working part-time at a local distillery. And she is a podcast for women who are happily single. I have to say, if you're going to look ahead and you're going to say she should be reading blogs and paying attention to women 20 years ahead of her who said, I had a lot of fun in my 40s. It is fun to go travel around the world with my single friends and to do these low stress jobs. But 20 years later, it gets old pretty quickly. And 20 years later is when you're alone and you don't have a family and you don't have a nice secure bank account so that you can deal with things. And just like COVID hit, we don't know what's coming down the pipe. We never are going to know what's coming down the pipe.
Right.
And so I think that pretty much I found this article, and I think this tends to be the type of article it is. It's that's interesting, but it's not a
Yet one of the flaws of this...
Life.
No, and the flaw of this article is, after having just told us about Miss Beck, who is single, 45, traveling a lot, living, working in a casino, low stress life, living alone, then what it says is, listen to this quote, Susan: a big advantage that millennials and Gen Z adults have in being socially connected and informed is that they can draw lessons from older adults at an earlier stage of their own lives. Social media has transmitted life lessons that boomers learned at the end of their careers about what matters. But they haven't taken all the lessons.
Right. We all do that. We all
very
pick and choose what we want to read. And I would certainly agree with this man who's quoted, who's 37, who says that success is your adult children. There was a song. Do you remember? I think it was a Harry Chapin, if that's his name, song, Time in a Bottle, and it was about a father who, when his little son says, come play ball with me, says, I'd love to, but I have to work. And when the little boy says, let's play a game, he says, I'd love to, but I have to work. And then the song goes through, and at the end, the father says to the son, who's now grown up, let's spend some time together. And the son says, I'd love to, but I'm busy. I have to work.
Really?
It was a harp. It is. And it's probably a kitschy song now if you listen to it, but when it was a number one song for a while. I don't remember when.
Do you remember the name?
Cat in the Cradle, or Cat's Cradle, something like
really?
that. The Cat's in the Cradle. That's the.
It is.
It's a very poignant song.
Yeah.
And what we've always said, I do think we actually say this in the Holistic You, that you hear a lot. No one ever said, my father worked an extra day. I worked an extra day on their gravestone. And a child says, I'm messing this up. Sorry, let's start that one again. Okay. Do you know what I mean about the soccer game?
Let's make sure we get it out right. Yes. It was very popular, and maybe it still is, for working dads to say, I would never miss my kid's ball game or baseball or whatever. I'd never miss my kid's ball game because, after all, who wants to put on your gravestone, he worked an extra day at the office, right?
Right. But the problem is that if your child isn't having supper, and they're going to bed hungry, they'd rather you go spend the day at the office than come to their ball game. And if you don't have children because you're so focused on, well, I need to be having my own life and I mustn't be tied down and I am the most important.
Then think of the voice of that unborn child who said, "Thanks for not bringing me into the world because you were so busy."
So it's that. I mean, I really do feel like everybody who's reading this article should order the Holistic You, because it's not enough. And when you go back to the fact that we're offering right now Boost Your Income as a download, it's not saying the most important free download. It's not saying the most important thing is growing your bank balance.
Although that's what it's focused on.
It's focused on it, but it's focused on it is in part of an entire system which we deal with in other things. And it's also focused on it. One of the 3 steps to success that you talk about is that you connect with other people. In other words, it's not, well, if I can earn a lot of money sitting in front of a computer and never talking to another person, that's what I should do. It's that you're connecting with other people as well. And in that is satisfaction. I think this is a little bit in the article. They talk about people doing work that they enjoy, and that's valid. What was the quote? And someone mentioned it in our coaching group last week. Someone mentioned, when we run a coaching group, and someone mentioned the quote, which is very well known also, that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yes.
Okay.
It's very common.
It's very common. It's not right. It's not true. It cannot be true. There is nothing you can do for your whole life that isn't going to have times or things that have to be done that are not appealing as part of it.
You'd think so. And also...
nothing.
Right. And what we stress all the time is how wrong it is to seek out a career based on what you enjoy doing, because there are a lot of things we enjoy doing and nobody's offered to pay us to do them. But far more importantly, do what needs to be done. Find out what needs to be done in your environment, in your orbit. And you can very often tell that by the relative pay scales for different occupations. And then learn to love doing it. And that's what most successful people do, because I have found through many, many, many interviews that the vast majority of people with careers, and, I've spoken to builders and truck drivers and riggers and plumbers and lawyers and doctors. And when you ask them if you could do it all over again, to speak to a guy in his 60s, you're coming to the tail end of a successful career doing whatever. If you could do it all again, what would you rather be? And you know what the overwhelming majority of them, I want to say all of them, but there's never always 100%, so maybe there are a few who didn't. But all I remember are the vast majority of them saying, I'd do exactly the same thing again. Now, it's impossible that by sheer chance they all lucked into exactly the thing that makes them happy. No, they learnt to be happy doing what they were doing. And one of the reasons is because doing something competently is really a source of joy.
That, I think, is part of what's missing here. Part of what's missing here is that your work is to give you money. And that is what people here are seeing. And I think what they're missing is an intrinsic satisfaction coming from doing something that is contributing to the lives of the people around you and to the society around you. And so they're focused on wealth as in, and we know people, right? You become a lawyer, and then we know people who they ended up getting the plum job. And it was soul sucking. They were expected to be on.
We know many people who
left it. And so I think that's the misapprehension or something in this article, which is the idea that it's how can I earn a lot of money versus what else could I do? And there's not, in this article really isn't the idea that in what I'm doing, I can have a lot of satisfaction. That goes along with that basic income idea, which, well, if the government could just supply us all with money, we wouldn't have to work, missing out that will take away from mental and spiritual.
Isn't that back to also the lottery thing? People who win money very seldom discover that their lives are improved. In fact, the stories are usually sad sagas of bad things, really a catalog of calamity. Almost always when people win a lot of money. People who earn a lot of money, totally different story. And that's why in Hebrew and also in English, interestingly enough, although not in all languages, there's a different word for winning and a different word for earning. Because earning money is a joyful occupation in and of itself. And back to the person who says, don't miss your kid's football game because no one's going to be interested in a gravestone that says he worked extra hours at the office. What would the son or daughter rather have? And I think I know the answer thinking back. Do you know what I'm going to say?
I think so. I think what you're going to say is the message. We haven't raised a very happy generation of children when we've been catering to, well, everything we do has to be to make the children happy. We've actually raised a very miserable generation of children who are full of anxiety. They have lack of resilience, lack of grit.
We always told our children that, don't you want me to be happy? No, we actually want you to be happy as an adult when you're 40.
I'm more concerned that you're happy at 40 than 14, 30 at 13. It works for a lot of the teenage numbers. Yes, that when you're so focused on the importance of the children's life, and that's what the adult's life revolves around, you end up very often making unhappy children, or children who grow into unhappy adults when they find out that that's not how the whole world works. The whole world is not there to make them happy.
I was very tickled to discover, as one sometimes does, that our children had a debate a few weeks ago about whether we loved each other more or whether we loved them more. And I think that was a great conversation that they had. I think it was a positive thing, because the reality is that a couple that nurture their marriage are giving the very best gift they can to their children, far more important than obsessively jumping up to take care of their children's every need. I think it's called helicopter parenting.
It's got a lot of names.
It's got many names. But you haven't told me what I was going to ask, what I was going to say. Would a child rather have a father, or shall we say a father for the moment, at the ball game he's playing, or would he rather be able to recount every thrilling detail of the game to his father at the dinner table?
Well, I don't think that's an either or, truthfully. I mean, I don't think that's an either or. I think that a child who had a good game is excited that if his parents was there. Does that mean is that like the cane being pulled off the stage?
Yeah, you zing me.
I don't think that's a valid. But
I've been thinking about, would I rather, and I was sort of tending towards thinking I would actually rather be able to talk about it with my father than simply know he was there.
But you could talk about it after knowing.
But let's say let's say it is an either or. And the father who is so concerned to be at the game is not nearly that concerned to be at the family table.
Okay, if you're going to make that, I just don't think that is the choice, though. But I think what's missing in this article, and it really is at the end, it's quoting one man, and he's saying, for him, physical and mental health comes first, followed by relationship with spouse, relationship with family, and personal growth. And he's missing the whole message of the holistic you, which is that your physical and mental health comes from your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your family, your relationship with your money, with the relationship with other things that you don't have. It's not physical. I mean, your fitness, because one of the chapter on fitness in the book talks about how our fitness is incredibly impacted by our mental and spiritual state. And so when he's putting those as two separate things, physical and mental health, they're not separate. If you're in the middle of a divorce, you are not going to have very good mental health. You're going to be going through a rough time. So if you say, I need my mental health, I have to do my yoga, or I have to go on my retreats. And because of that, you end up without a marriage. It's not going to end up helping your physical and mental health.
Precisely. And you know what? One of the idols that the holistic you shatters into smithereens?
Which?
The idol of we must emphasize work-life balance.
Yes.
Because looking at the 5 F's, family, finances, faith, fitness, and friendships, finance, your whole work life, your whole financial and business life, is part of life. And it is assisted by many other aspects, many other of these 5 arenas, and it in turn impacts the other 5. But the idea that you've sort of got to,
your work and your life.
No, that's true.
The phrase I like to use is that the 5 parts of your life have to complete each other, not compete with each other.
That's good.
When you come to a specific, I have 10 minutes, what can I do? Obviously, you cannot do all five. It's not, they don't, you constantly mix them together, but in their overall scheme of things, they complete each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Susan, let's just look and see if there's anything else in this article from the Wall Street Journal, which appeared in the journal at the end of June.
I think also, you did make this point earlier, but when you look at it, like this woman who is now working as a blackjack dealer and a distillery, well, she still owns an apartment in Manhattan, which she rents out. We're not talking about people who are saying, will I have a roof over my head tonight?
Yeah, and by the way, an apartment in Manhattan is not the same price as an apartment in Boise, Idaho.
Actually, after the next mayoral election, it could be that will go for very...
You're right. At the time we're having this conversation, there is a Muslim socialist guy running for mayor of New York who's got through and won the first.
The Democratic nominee.
He will be the Democratic nominee. Eric Adams will probably run against him, and maybe others. Maybe Cuomo might as well.
Curtis Silwa from the Guardian.
Yeah, he's been around for years.
I have a soft spot for him.
I do too. Yeah, I do too. Yeah, God bless him. But, yeah, I lost my train of thought on that one. I'm sorry, but...
Real estate in Manhattan maybe going down.
Your point that she owns... So this article is not about regular folks.
This is a first world problem. This is not an article, which in itself is
we should go back and look at the letters to the editor and see if people nailed that point. I think that's maybe one of the most important things about this article, is that this is not how regular people...
Yes, and so, and I don't think most people, if I think of being with what the word wealth means, you can only imagine what they are thinking when they're talking about, well, they want to be financially secure. They want to be able to have a family if they want to have a family. They want to be able to have a home and vacations and all sorts of things. So what did wealth mean? I mean, Kim Kardashian, what were they? They had very unhealthy views if wealth was more than that. But
and as I said at the start, if you're dividing your life up, and somebody who wrote to an Ask the Rabbi recently wrote to us and said he's experiencing turmoil and unhappiness, and he tried to do. People told him he should separate his personal life from his business life, and I can't do it. And we answered, I think you made that point, is of course you can't do it. That's completely wrong.
They affect each other. They're part of your whole life. And the other thing, and I think I started to say it earlier and didn't follow it up, is this may be one of the most controversial parts of our book, The Holistic You, is where we talk about the myth of having it all, first of all. But one of the things we say is that the closest you can come to having it all takes two people. The idea of an individual having it all is almost impossible. Two people together, a married couple,
as a partnership,
come closer to having it all, because and this is missing from this article, where the idea is no difference, male, female, no difference in what you should be pursuing or what you might be doing.
And marriage, I don't think, plays much of a role.
They talk about one of the women leaving a marriage. Her marriage failed.
Yes.
A lot of these people are married, which is, again, isn't that Rob Henderson's Cadillac values talk, that luxury values, that he was in college in Yale, and he had come from a hard scrabble background and was not your typical, and people he was with would talk about how marriage is just a social construct and we need to not make such a big deal of it. Well, they themselves were going to be married, but they were kind of taking it away. They were making it not cool for other people who needed it in a way they didn't. The same way they talked about how unimportant money is as they went off to work for investment banks.
Yes, that's right.
They didn't have to worry. So I feel like this article, in the same way, a lot of the people in this article actually are married without a discussion, without a thought of, so you have a part of your life, a section of your life is working.
Yes.
And yet when you write an article like this, if you would tell somebody, and you would tell an up-and-coming youngster who does not come from family money, oh, don't worry about money. Money is not
Focus
important.
on your health your physical health and your mental health.
And the other part is that we know...
Is it even possible? We've covered this in the Holistic You. How can you expect to have mental health if you struggle financially?
Right. You're not going to. Or family-wise, or fitness-wise. It's much, much harder. And the other thing, and the aspect that's missing here at all, and we know people, we happen to know a few people who have family legacies. And that family legacies have meant...
You mean financial
legacies.
Are trust fund babies.
Trust fund babies. And they grew up knowing that they did not have to
ever have to work. And they didn't.
And they didn't, or they worked on what they were in love with and passionate about, but without the feeling of that when it hits a rough spot, I have to see my way through the rough spot because I have to pay my rent at the end of the month, so it doesn't matter.
When God says, and the Bible says, God put Adam in the Garden of Eden to work it, that was paradise. That was before the fall, not after. There is a joy in working.
That's missing here. Not only a joy, but and again, we talk about this in the book. I know we're repeating this ad nauseum, but it's a really good book, though. But what we talk about the fact that particularly for a man, who he is very tied into what he does. For work, how he earns a living. And the trust fund babies that we know would have done much better had they not known that they did not need to work, because the money you get from working is a sign that you've pleased somebody, that you've been doing something, somebody else finds it valuable. You can work really hard. We could spend our day today walking around our house moving furniture. That would be a lot of hard work. We would not get a penny for it. And that's a sign that it's not work that's actually valuable to anyone else. And when you don't know that you need to have a value in somebody else's eyes, men need that very much.
And women need men to have it. In other words, something we, again, talk about controversial aspects of the book, that it can be really, really problematic for a woman if her man exhibits no financial ambition. Really problematic, right? Let people hear you say right.
Right. Right. Picturing the video, I'm nodding. Yes, you're right. Most people are listening, not looking. Sorry. Right.
But it's completely not true the opposite. In other words, a man is not going to love or pick or be infatuated with a woman because of her financial ambition.
If he is, then he's not very worthwhile.
He's not much of a man.
It's not a good idea to go for him.
I mean, so it's a huge difference. And by the way, here's a terrible thought. More than one of the men you and I are thinking in mind who were trust fund babies never married.
That's true. And that was partially because they did not give across to women
a masculine vibe.
A masculine vibe.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so I think we have pretty much.
I just want to read. Torn into pieces. Don't bother reading. I do want
to go and read the online comments.
Yes, we'll look at that. I just wanted to read this paragraph from the article. Wealth, status, and occupation are no longer the gold standard when it comes to defining success for adults who have yet to reach middle age. Instead, young Americans rank physical and mental health as the top measures of success. Wealth came in fifth, according to a recent survey of adults aged 18 to 34, and we add, all of whom don't have to worry about money.
Well, certainly the ones interviewed. But we would absolutely agree it's not the good. It should never be. Having a certain amount in your bank account should never be your measure of success.
Of course not.
So we would absolutely agree with that. I just think that people who act on, if anyone was to act on this article, they'll find out that they're missing other things. And,
there's a sad collection of but discussions on the internet. And it's, I think it's entitled Waiting for a Proposal. And it's women talking about the fact that the guy's not proposing and time is going by and it's not happening. And they sort of ask their sisters on the discussion board. He tells me that he wants to get engaged just as soon as he's got enough for us to buy a house. Is that valid? And all the girls pour onto it, it's just another excuse, it's just another easy, he's just trying to postpone it and have the benefits of you as a girlfriend without having to propose. But that's the idea. All 5 F's of your life have to be, or 4 have to be put on hold till you achieve a certain financial target. No, that is not. But now the inverse of that is...
Let's put that one on hold while you're achieving all the other.
That's right, exactly.
Because you won't achieve Together
For one
without
thing,
it.
you won't make a good marriage if you have no financial prospects, which is why, since time immemorial, girls' fathers have always said to the young man knocking on the door or waiting to pick the daughter up, what are your prospects?
And now you're talking of another generation. Most girls do not have a father. First of all, many girls don't have a father living in the same home with them. Then they're not living in the same home because they're now in their mid-20s. They've moved out. So even if they do have a mother and a father in their childhood home, they're not in their childhood home. Now, that is very anachronistic. But what happens is that the woman herself does. A woman herself wants to know what
Yes.
are your financial prospects.
Nonetheless, even though it's anachronistic and it makes me sound of a previous generation, which I'm not, but I still think I have to say it, because although it may be diminishing numbers of people who can relate to it directly from their own personal experience, I still think there is value in teaching pure mathematics. In other words, here's how it ought to be. I know it's not that way for you, and probably for the majority of people listening, but it's still worth knowing, because at some point or another, who knows, but normality may be rebuilt. Could happen.
Okay.
And if it does, it'll be with the help of the holistic you. Yeah, you were right. It is a good.
It started by talking about holistic, but it's leaving earning a living out of the holistic, and I think it's missing so much.
I think, didn't they use the word holistic?
Yes, that's what
I worried about being 40 or 50 and not having any interests outside of work, says Smith. His priorities have shifted, and that success is about having a more holistic life.
We would totally agree with that.
Yeah,
we would say you
absolutely.
had a very wrong idea of what success was, but neither should you downplay the importance of the financial aspect of your life.
Well, thank you, Susan. I enjoyed discussing the article with you. And
we always enjoy discussing articles together, and we usually end up, that's, I guess, why we're married, because we usually end up, even if we don't start out in agreement, we end up reaching a point of agreement.
Yes.
This one we started out in agreement.
Yeah.
While we were writing the book.
All right, so download your free copy of Boost Your Income, which admittedly focuses on finances, but then you can cover the holistic you and make sure you've got everything else. So go ahead and download that at RabbiDanielLapin.com. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and
As a happy warrior.
Become a member of our Happy Warrior community. I didn't ask you to do that yet. So,
People should know is that this is the podcast for everybody. But there is a podcast segment that's a bonus podcast that goes only to We Happy Warrior members.
And you know that when you're a Happy Warrior member, you can go to the Happy Warrior site and all the bonuses, the shorter podcasts that have been prepared exclusively for Happy Warrior members are all there. So you can listen to them in any order or catch up with them. And
with a lot of other membership perks.
Yeah.
But that is one of them that there isn't.
We should do one of those together as well, because on that podcast, I do the things that I may be reticent about saying completely publicly. So
yes, I've noticed how you just don't like ruffling feathers.
Well, my paths are the paths of righteousness, and my ways
are the ways of peace.
So it is. Thanks so much for being part of the show. Susan and I love being together with you, and we wish you a week of moving onwards and upwards with your families and your finances, your faith, your friendships, and your fitness. God bless.